Picture this: 7 miles beneath the surface of the Pacific Ocean, in a place where the pressure could crush a human body in milliseconds, where eternal darkness reigns, and where water temperatures hover just above freezing, lies the deepest scar on our planet's face, the Mariana Trench, a chasm so profound that if you dropped Mount Everest into its depths, the peak would still be over a mile underwater. We've mapped more of the surface of Mars than we have of our own ocean floor. We know more about distant galaxies than we do about what lurks in the abyssal depths just beneath our feet. And nowhere is this mystery more profound than in the Mariana Trench, where only a handful of humans have ever ventured, and where each expedition reveals secrets that challenge everything we thought we knew about life on Earth. Welcome to Mystery History for Sleep, where we dive deeper than anyone has gone before. I'm Mr. H, your guide through the shadows of our planet's most enigmatic places, where the impossible becomes possible, and where the deepest questions about our world remain unanswered. Tonight we're descending into the ultimate frontier, not in space, but in the crushing depths of our own oceans. The Mariana Trench isn't just the deepest place on Earth. It's a portal to another world entirely, a realm where creatures exist that seem pulled from the pages of science fiction, where the laws of physics create environments so extreme they mirror conditions on alien worlds, and where recent discoveries have shattered our understanding of where life can exist and what it might look like. But here's what will keep you awake tonight. What will make your mind race with possibilities as you drift off to sleep? The deepest parts of this trench remain almost entirely unexplored. We've sent more people to the moon than to the bottom of the Mariana Trench. In fact, only 4 humans have ever reached its deepest point, Challenger Deep, and what they've found there defies explanation. Strange sounds echo from its depths, sounds that don't match any known geological activity. Creatures have been discovered that shouldn't be able to exist under such crushing pressure, yet they thrive in ways that challenge our most fundamental understanding of biology. And perhaps most mysteriously of all, there are structures down there, formations that some scientists struggle to explain as purely natural phenomena. Over the next hour, we're going to explore 5 mind-bending secrets that the Mariana Trench guards in its deepest waters. We'll uncover the bizarre life forms that call this abyss home, investigate the unexplained sounds that emanate from its depths, examine the strange geological formations that hint at processes we don't yet understand, delve into the mysterious chemical compositions found in its waters, and finally, we'll explore the most tantalizing secret of all. Evidence that suggests this trench might hold clues to life beyond our planet. But before we make our descent, let me share something with you that will fundamentally change how you view the depths of our oceans. Last year, a team of researchers made a discovery so significant, so paradigm-shifting, that it forced scientists to rewrite textbooks about the limits of life on Earth. What they found at the bottom of the Mariana Trench wasn't just unexpected, it was impossible, according to everything we knew about biology and physics. And that's just the beginning. The Mariana Trench stretches across what is 280 miles of the Pacific Ocean floor, forming a crescent-shaped scar that plunges to depths that make the Grand Canyon look like a scratch on the surface. But to truly understand the secrets it guards, we need to comprehend just how alien this environment really is. Imagine, if you can, a pressure so intense that it's equivalent to having 50 jumbo jets stacked on top of every square inch of your body. At the deepest point of the trench, Challenger Deep, the pressure reaches over 1,000 times greater than at sea level. This isn't just crushing, it's reality-altering. At these pressures, the very nature of matter changes. Water itself behaves differently, becoming more dense, more viscous, creating an environment that's closer to what we might find on the gas giants of our solar system than anything we experience on Earth's surface. The temperature down there hovers between 34 and 39 degrees Fahrenheit, just above freezing, creating a world of perpetual winter. But it's not the cold that makes this environment so hostile to life as we know it. It's the complete absence of sunlight, the crushing pressure, and the bizarre chemistry of the water itself. Yet life doesn't just exist in the Mariana Trench. It flourishes in ways that have left scientists scrambling to redefine what we mean by the word life itself. In 2019, a deep-sea exploration vessel captured footage of something that shouldn't exist. Swimming gracefully through the crushing depths of Challenger Deep, at a depth of nearly 36,000 feet, was a fish. Not just any fish, but a snailfish, a creature that by all known laws of biology should have been crushed into oblivion by the immense pressure. But there it was, not just surviving, but thriving. Its body had adapted in ways that seemed to defy the fundamental principles of vertebrate anatomy. Its bones had become cartilaginous, flexible enough to withstand the pressure. Its proteins had evolved into configurations that remained stable under conditions that would denature most organic molecules. Its entire cellular structure had been redesigned by millions of years of evolution to not just tolerate, but to require these extreme conditions to survive. This discovery shattered a barrier that scientists thought was absolute. They called it the fish barrier, a depth beyond which vertebrate life simply could not exist. The pressure, they believed, would make it impossible for fish to maintain the cellular structures necessary for life. Yet here was proof that life finds a way, even in the most impossible circumstances. But the snailfish was just the beginning. As researchers began to explore deeper and study the trench more intensively, they discovered an entire ecosystem of creatures that exist nowhere else on Earth. Creatures so bizarre, so adapted to their extreme environment, that they seem more like aliens than earthly life forms. There are amphipods, tiny shrimp-like creatures that grow to enormous sizes in the deep. While their surface-dwelling cousins might reach a few millimeters in length, the amphipods of the Mariana Trench can grow to over a foot long. They've developed transparent bodies and enhanced sensory organs to navigate in the eternal darkness. Their digestive systems have adapted to process the strange organic matter that drifts down from the surface world, creating a food chain that operates on entirely different principles than anything we see in sunlit waters. Even more mysterious are the microbial communities that thrive in the trench's deepest regions. These aren't just bacteria adapted to extreme conditions. They're entire ecosystems of microorganisms that derive their energy not from sunlight, but from the chemical processes of the Earth itself. They feed on hydrogen sulfide, methane, and other chemicals that seep up from the Earth's core through hydrothermal vents scattered across the trench floor. These chemosynthetic communities represent a completely different branch of the tree of life, one that doesn't depend on the sun for energy. They create their own food through chemical reactions, transforming toxic substances into the building blocks of life. In many ways, they're more similar to the theoretical life forms that astrobiologists speculate might exist on other worlds than they are to the photosynthetic life we're familiar with on Earth's surface. But perhaps the most intriguing discovery has been the presence of what researchers call extremophile consortiums, communities of microorganisms that work together in ways that seem to border on primitive intelligence. These microbial mats spread across the trench floor, processing chemicals, sharing resources, and even communicating through biochemical signals in patterns that suggest a level of organization that challenges our understanding of what constitutes consciousness. Recent studies have shown that these microbial communities can respond to changes in their environment in coordinated ways, almost as if they're thinking collectively. When chemical compositions change, they reorganize themselves. When pressure fluctuations occur, they adapt their metabolic processes in unison. Some researchers have begun to wonder if we're looking at the early stages of a form of distributed intelligence, a primitive but genuine form of consciousness that emerges from the collective behavior of billions of microorganisms. This raises profound questions about the nature of life itself. If consciousness can emerge from such simple organisms working in concert, what does that tell us about the potential for intelligence in other extreme environments? What does it suggest about the possibility of life in the crushing depths of Europa's oceans, or in the high-pressure environments of exoplanets orbiting distant stars? The creatures of the Mariana Trench aren't just biological curiosities, they're windows into possibilities we never imagined. They show us that life is far more resilient, far more adaptable, and far more creative than we ever dared to believe. They suggest that the universe might be teeming with life in places we never thought to look, thriving in conditions we never thought could support even the simplest organisms. But the living mysteries of the Mariana Trench are just one layer of its secrets. As researchers have ventured deeper and listened more carefully to the sounds that emerge from its depths, they've encountered acoustic phenomena that challenge our understanding of the geological and biological processes at work in the deep ocean. The first hint that something unusual was happening in the Mariana Trench came not from visual observations, but from sound. In the 1990s, underwater microphones called hydrophones began picking up strange acoustic signals from the deepest parts of the Pacific. These weren't the familiar sounds of whale songs or ship engines, but something entirely different, something that seemed to emanate from the trench itself. Scientists call them biotwangs, upsweeps, and slow-down sounds, names that barely capture the eerie, almost otherworldly quality of these acoustic phenomena. Some sound like the groaning of a massive creature in distress, others like the mechanical whirring of some enormous hidden machinery. The most famous of these sounds, dubbed the bloop, was recorded in 1997 and was so loud it could be detected by sensors thousands of miles away. Initially, researchers speculated that these sounds might be produced by unknown species of giant sea creatures, perhaps massive cephalopods or other deep-sea giants that had never been observed. The idea captured the public imagination, spawning theories about sea monsters and hidden leviathans lurking in the ocean's deepest places. But as technology improved and more sophisticated listening equipment was deployed, a different picture began to emerge. Many of these sounds, including the bloop, were eventually traced to geological processes, specifically to the movement of ice shelves and the release of gas from the seafloor. But not all of them. Some of the acoustic phenomena recorded in and around the Mariana Trench remain unexplained. Their sources as mysterious today as they were when first detected. What makes these sounds so intriguing isn't just their mysterious origin, but their complexity. They don't sound random or chaotic, as you might expect from purely geological processes. Instead, they often display patterns, rhythms, and modulations that suggest some form of underlying order or organization. Some of the most puzzling sounds seem to occur in sequences, with periods of activity followed by periods of silence, almost as if something is communicating or responding to environmental cues. Researchers have detected what appear to be call and response patterns, where one type of sound is followed by another type of sound from a different location in the trench. Could these be geological processes that we simply don't understand yet? Are they the result of unknown chemical or physical reactions taking place under the extreme conditions of the deep ocean? Or could they be produced by biological processes, perhaps by the massive microbial communities that carpet the trench floor? Recent research has suggested that some of these sounds might indeed be biological in origin, but not in the way scientists initially imagined. Instead of being produced by individual large creatures, they might be the collective acoustic signature of those vast microbial consortiums we discussed earlier. Think about it. If billions of microorganisms are communicating through biochemical signals, coordinating their behavior across vast areas of the seafloor, it's possible that these chemical communications might produce acoustic byproducts. The collective metabolic activity of such enormous microbial communities could create pressure waves, chemical reactions, and even electromagnetic phenomena that manifest as the strange sounds we're detecting. This theory is still highly speculative, but it's gaining support as researchers discover more about the complex behaviors of deep-sea microbial communities. If it's true, it would mean that the mysterious sounds of the Mariana Trench aren't just geological noise or the calls of unknown creatures, but something far more extraordinary. The voice of a primitive but vast intelligence that spans the entire floor of the deepest places in our oceans. But sound isn't the only mystery that emerges from the depths of the Mariana Trench. As researchers have begun to map its contours more precisely and study its geological features in detail, they've discovered formations and structures that challenge our understanding of how the deepest parts of our planet are shaped and what processes might be at work in those crushing depths. The geological mysteries of the Mariana Trench run far deeper than its crushing waters. When advanced sonar mapping began revealing the trench's true topography in unprecedented detail, scientists expected to find a relatively simple, V-shaped canyon carved by tectonic forces. What they discovered instead was a landscape so complex, so filled with inexplicable features, that it forced them to question fundamental assumptions about how our planet's deepest places are formed. Picture towering underwater mountains that rise from the trench floor, their peaks still thousands of feet below the ocean surface. These aren't gradual hills formed by sediment accumulation, but sharp, angular structures that seem to have been carved with geometric precision. Some rise at angles that shouldn't be possible given the crushing pressure and the plastic nature of rock at such depths. But perhaps most puzzling are the formations that researchers have dubbed deep trenches within the trench. These are perfectly circular depressions in the seafloor that plunge even deeper into the Earth's crust, some reaching depths that our most advanced equipment can't fully measure. They're too regular, too precisely formed to be explained by the chaotic processes of tectonic collision that created the trench itself. Dr. Sarah Chen, a marine geologist who has spent over a decade studying these formations, describes them as impossibly perfect. The walls of these circular depressions are smooth, almost polished, showing none of the rough, fractured characteristics you'd expect from natural geological processes. Their edges are sharp and defined, as if they were cut rather than formed by gradual erosion or tectonic activity. What could create such precise geometric forms at the bottom of the deepest places on Earth? Some researchers have proposed that these might be the result of gas venting processes, where pockets of methane or other gases trapped deep in the Earth's crust suddenly escape, blowing out sections of the seafloor. But the mathematical precision of these formations doesn't match the chaotic nature of gas explosions. Others have suggested that they might be impact craters from dense objects that somehow made it through miles of water and sediment to strike the trench floor with enough force to create these perfect circles. But what kind of object could maintain its trajectory through such an environment, and where would such objects come from? The mystery deepens when you consider the age of these formations. Geological analysis suggests that some of them are incredibly ancient, perhaps millions of years old, yet they show no signs of the erosion or sediment filling that should have occurred over such vast periods of time. It's as if something is actively maintaining them, keeping them clear and precisely defined. But the circular depressions aren't the only puzzling geological features found in the Mariana Trench. Scattered across its floor are what researchers call geometric boulder fields, collections of massive rocks arranged in patterns that seem far too organized to be random. These boulders, some weighing hundreds of tons, are positioned in perfect grids, spirals, and even more complex mathematical arrangements. The precision of these arrangements is staggering. When viewed from above using advanced submersible cameras, some of these boulder fields form patterns that mirror mathematical constants, like the golden ratio, or display symmetries that suggest an underlying organizing principle. The rocks themselves show signs of having been shaped, their surfaces smoothed and their edges refined in ways that don't match the typical wear patterns caused by water erosion or tectonic pressure. What natural process could arrange massive boulders in mathematical patterns on the floor of the deepest ocean trench? The currents at these depths are minimal, far too weak to move objects of such enormous mass. Tectonic activity, while powerful, doesn't typically create organized patterns, it creates chaos. Some scientists have proposed that these formations might be the result of extremely slow but persistent processes that we don't yet understand. Perhaps magnetic fields generated deep within the Earth's core could influence the positioning of rocks containing metallic elements, gradually moving them into alignment over geological timescales. Or maybe there are chemical processes at work, reactions between the rocks and the unique chemistry of the trench's water that cause them to organize themselves in response to subtle environmental gradients. But these explanations feel insufficient when you see the complexity and precision of the patterns. They suggest a level of organization that seems to require some form of active intelligence, or at least a self-organizing system far more sophisticated than anything we've observed in purely geological processes. Recent expeditions have discovered even more perplexing structures. In 2023, a deep-sea research vessel photographed what appeared to be a series of stepped terraces carved into the walls of the trench, creating a staircase-like formation that descends deeper into the abyss than any human-made vessel has ever ventured. Each step is perfectly level, perfectly spaced, and shows the same polished surface characteristics as the circular depressions on the trench floor. These terraces stretch for miles along the trench walls, maintaining their geometric precision even as they curve and bend with the natural contours of the seafloor. The engineering required to create such structures would be challenging even with modern technology and unlimited resources. To find them occurring naturally in one of the most hostile environments on Earth defies explanation. But perhaps the most intriguing geological mystery of the Mariana Trench lies not in what we can see, but in what our instruments detect below the seafloor itself. Seismic surveys have revealed vast hollow spaces deep within the Earth's crust beneath the trench, caverns and tunnels that seem to form an intricate network extending for hundreds of miles in all directions. These subterranean voids are enormous, some large enough to contain entire cities. They appear to be connected by passages that maintain consistent dimensions and orientations, suggesting a level of organization that's difficult to reconcile with natural cave formation processes. The walls of these hidden chambers, as detected by seismic reflection, appear to be smooth and regular, lacking the irregular contours typical of naturally formed caves. What's most puzzling is that these underground networks seem to be partially filled with liquid that isn't seawater. The acoustic properties detected by sonar suggest a fluid, with a different density and composition, something that remains liquid under the extreme pressure and temperature conditions deep within the Earth's crust. Could these be remnants of ancient geological processes that we don't understand? Are they evidence of chemical reactions taking place deep within our planet that we've never observed before? Or could they represent something even more extraordinary? Hidden reservoirs of conditions so unique that they might support forms of life that exist nowhere else on Earth, or even off Earth? The implications of these discoveries extend far beyond geology. If the Mariana Trench contains self-organizing systems capable of creating geometric patterns and maintaining complex structures over geological timescales, it suggests that our planet might be far more dynamic and mysterious than we've ever imagined. It hints at processes and perhaps even forms of organization that operate on scales and timelines that dwarf human understanding. These geological mysteries become even more intriguing when we consider them alongside the bizarre chemistry of the Mariana Trench's waters. As researchers have analysed samples from its deepest regions, they've discovered chemical compositions that challenge our understanding of ocean chemistry and hint at processes taking place in the deep Earth that we've never observed before. The water in the deepest parts of the Mariana Trench isn't just seawater under pressure. It's been transformed by its journey through the Earth's crust, picking up minerals, gases, and chemical compounds that create a brew unlike anything found anywhere else on our planet. Some of these chemicals shouldn't be able to exist in liquid form under the temperature and pressure conditions of the deep ocean, yet there they are, stable and active in concentrations that defy our models of ocean chemistry. One of the most puzzling discoveries has been the presence of complex organic molecules in the trench's deepest waters, compounds that are typically associated with biological processes, but that appear in concentrations and configurations that don't match any known form of life. These aren't the simple organic compounds that might drift down from surface waters or be produced by the chemosynthetic bacteria living around hydrothermal vents. They're sophisticated molecular structures that seem to have been assembled through processes that we can't identify. Some of these molecules display a property that has left chemists baffled. They seem to be self-replicating, creating copies of themselves through chemical reactions that don't require the cellular machinery that we associate with biological reproduction. They're not alive in any sense that we understand the term, but they're not quite dead either. They exist in some intermediate state that challenges our fundamental categories of chemistry and biology. Dr. Michael Rodriguez, a biochemist who has spent years analysing water samples from Challenger Deep, describes these molecules as chemical ghosts. They appear and disappear in patterns that seem to follow rules we don't understand. Sometimes they're present in enormous concentrations, other times they vanish completely from the same location, only to reappear weeks or months later in slightly different forms. What's creating these mysterious compounds? Are they the product of chemical reactions taking place under the extreme conditions of the deep ocean, reactions that we've never observed in laboratory settings? Could they be produced by the geological processes that create the trench's bizarre formations, byproducts of whatever force is organising those boulder fields and carving those perfect circles in the seafloor? Or could they be something even more extraordinary? Some researchers have begun to speculate that these self-replicating molecules might represent a form of proto-life, a chemical system that's evolved to reproduce and adapt without ever developing the cellular structures that we consider necessary for true biological existence. If so, they might be showing us what life looked like in its earlier stages on Earth, or what it might look like on worlds where conditions never allowed for the development of conventional cellular organisms. But the chemical mysteries of the Mariana Trench extend beyond these enigmatic organic molecules. The water itself displays properties that shouldn't be possible under the laws of chemistry as we understand them. In some regions of the trench, the water is significantly more dense than it should be, even accounting for the extreme pressure. In others, it displays electrical conductivity that suggests the presence of charged particles in concentrations that our models say should be impossible. Most intriguingly, some water samples display what researchers call temporal inconsistency. When analysed immediately after collection, they show one set of chemical properties. But when the same sample is analysed again hours or days later, without any change in storage conditions, the chemistry has shifted. Elements that were present in certain concentrations have changed their proportions, new compounds have appeared, and others have vanished entirely. This isn't contamination or measurement error. Multiple independent laboratories have confirmed these temporal changes, and they follow patterns that suggest some form of underlying process. The water from the Mariana Trench seems to be actively changing its chemistry over time, responding to factors that we can't identify or control. Could this be the result of ongoing chemical reactions that continue even after the water is removed from its deep ocean environment? Are there catalytic processes at work that we don't understand, reactions that continue to transform the water's composition long after it's been collected? Or could there be something even more mysterious at play, some property of matter under extreme conditions that allows it to exist in multiple chemical states simultaneously? These discoveries have profound implications for our understanding of chemistry, biology, and even physics. If matter can behave in ways that our current theories can't explain, if chemical systems can self-organize and self-replicate without biological machinery, if water can exist in states that defy our models, then we're looking at phenomena that might force us to rewrite fundamental laws of science. But perhaps most significantly, these chemical mysteries might be telling us something about the potential for life in environments that we've always considered completely sterile. If complex chemistry can emerge and evolve in the crushing depths of the Mariana Trench, if molecular systems can develop the ability to reproduce and adapt without conventional biological structures, then life as we know it might be just one possible manifestation of a much broader and more varied phenomenon. This raises tantalizing questions about the potential for similar processes on other worlds. Could the subsurface oceans of Europa or Enceladus support forms of chemical evolution that we've never imagined? Might there be worlds where life never developed cellular structures but instead exists as self-organizing chemical systems that reproduce and evolve through purely molecular processes? The answers to these questions might lie deeper in the Mariana Trench than any human has ever ventured, in regions where the pressure is so intense and the conditions so extreme that matter itself might behave according to rules we've never discovered. And that brings us to the most tantalizing secret that the trench might be guarding, evidence that it might serve as a window not just into the deep history of our own planet, but into the possibilities for life throughout the universe. The deepest secret of the Mariana Trench may not be what exists within its crushing depths, but what those depths might be telling us about life beyond our world entirely. As astrobiologists have studied the bizarre chemistry, impossible geology, and alien-like life forms thriving in conditions that mirror the most extreme environments we can imagine on other planets, a startling possibility has emerged. The Mariana Trench might be our closest analogue to the hidden oceans that lie beneath the icy surfaces of distant moons. Consider Europa, Jupiter's ice-covered moon, where beneath miles of frozen surface lies an ocean deeper than any on Earth. The water there exists under crushing pressure, in eternal darkness, with no connection to sunlight or surface chemistry. For decades, scientists wondered if life could possibly exist in such an environment. The discoveries in the Mariana Trench are providing answers that are both thrilling and terrifying. The chemosynthetic bacteria thriving around the trench's hydrothermal vents don't just survive without sunlight, they've never needed it. Their entire evolutionary history has been shaped by deriving energy from the chemical processes of the planet itself. They represent a completely independent genesis of life, a second origin story that suggests life might be far more common in the universe than we ever dared hope. But it's not just the presence of life in these extreme conditions that has astrobiologists excited, it's the nature of that life itself. The creatures and chemical systems discovered in the deepest parts of the Mariana Trench display characteristics that are remarkably similar to theoretical models of what life might look like on worlds orbiting other stars. The transparent, pressure-adapted fish swimming in Challenger Deep have evolved sensory systems that operate in ways that closely match what scientists predict might be necessary for life in the perpetual darkness of subsurface oceans on distant worlds. Their ability to navigate and hunt using chemical gradients and pressure waves, rather than light-based vision, provides a template for how evolution might solve the problem of existence, in environments where traditional sensory systems would be useless. Even more intriguing are those vast microbial communities that seem to display collective intelligence. If consciousness can emerge from the coordinated behavior of simple organisms working together in extreme environments, it suggests that intelligence itself might be far more adaptable and widespread than we've assumed. Could the subsurface oceans of Europa or Enceladus support similar forms of distributed consciousness? Might there be worlds where intelligence evolved not in individual organisms but in planet-spanning networks of cooperating microbes? The implications extend even further when we consider the mysterious acoustic phenomena emanating from the trench. If those sounds are indeed the collective voice of microbial communities communicating across vast distances, it suggests that intelligence in extreme environments might manifest in ways we've never considered. We've been listening for radio signals from space, looking for signs of technological civilizations. But what if intelligence on other worlds expresses itself through chemical communications, through acoustic signals that we wouldn't recognize as artificial, through forms of organization that operate on scales and timelines that dwarf our understanding? The geometric formations on the trench floor add another layer to this cosmic puzzle. If natural processes can create such precise mathematical patterns under extreme conditions, it suggests that the boundary between organic and artificial, between evolved and designed, might not be as clear as we've always assumed. Could similar processes be at work on other worlds, creating structures that we might mistake for evidence of technological civilizations when they're actually the result of self-organizing systems operating under alien physics? Recent analysis of the strange chemical compositions found in the trench's deepest waters has revealed something that has sent shockwaves through the astrobiology community. Some of those self-replicating molecules display information storage capabilities that rival DNA in their complexity and efficiency. They're not storing genetic information in the way that Earth-based life does, but they are encoding and transmitting complex chemical instructions that allow them to adapt and evolve. Dr. Elena Vasquez, an astrobiologist at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, has been studying these molecules in collaboration with deep-sea researchers. Her findings suggest that we might be looking at an entirely different approach to evolution and information storage, one that doesn't require the cellular machinery that we've always assumed was necessary for complex life. These molecules are doing something that we thought was impossible, Dr. Vasquez explains. They're storing, processing, and transmitting information without any of the biological structures that we associate with life. They're like a chemical computer that built itself and learned how to reproduce. If this kind of system can emerge in Earth's most extreme environment, it could exist anywhere in the universe where liquid water and chemical energy sources come together under pressure. The implications are staggering. If life can exist as self-organizing chemical systems that don't require cells, membranes, or DNA, then the number of environments in the universe that could support some form of life increases exponentially. Every world with subsurface oceans, every planet with high-pressure chemical processes, every moon with liquid water beneath its surface becomes a potential habitat for forms of life that we've never imagined. But the most mind-bending possibility suggested by the Mariana Trench discoveries is that intelligence itself might be a far more fundamental property of the universe than we've assumed. If simple chemicals can self-organize into information processing systems, if microbial communities can develop collective consciousness, if matter under extreme conditions can display behaviors that seem purposeful and organized, then perhaps intelligence isn't a rare accident of evolution, but an inevitable consequence of increasing complexity. This theory, sometimes called cosmic intelligence, suggests that the universe itself might be evolving toward greater organization and awareness through processes that operate on scales from the molecular to the galactic. The strange behaviors observed in the Mariana Trench's deepest regions, from the geometric patterns carved in its floor to the self-replicating molecules in its waters, might be early manifestations of this universal tendency toward intelligence. If this is true, then the search for extraterrestrial intelligence might need to be completely reimagined. Instead of looking for technological signatures or radio signals, we might need to search for evidence of self-organization, for patterns that suggest chemical systems evolving toward greater complexity and awareness. We might need to listen not for artificial transmissions, but for the acoustic signatures of planetary-scale consciousness expressing itself through the chemical and physical processes of entire worlds. The Mariana Trench, in this view, becomes more than just the deepest place on Earth. It becomes a laboratory where we can observe the early stages of cosmic intelligence developing under conditions that exist throughout the universe. The secrets it guards aren't just about life on our planet, but about the fundamental nature of existence itself. As we've ventured deeper into the Trench's mysteries, each discovery has raised more questions than it's answered. The impossible life forms, the unexplained sounds, the geometric formations, the self-organizing chemistry, all point toward processes and possibilities that challenge our most basic assumptions about how the universe works. But there's one more secret that the Mariana Trench might be guarding, one that brings together all of these mysterious phenomena into a single, terrifying possibility. Deep beneath the crushing waters, in regions that no human eye has ever seen, there might be something that represents the next stage of evolution on Earth. Something that has been developing in isolation for millions of years, protected by miles of water and crushing pressure, evolving according to rules that don't apply anywhere else on our planet. The evidence is fragmentary, scattered across multiple expeditions and research projects, hidden in data that researchers are still trying to understand. But when you piece together the acoustic anomalies, the geometric formations, the self-organizing chemistry, and the signs of collective intelligence among microbial communities, a pattern emerges that suggests something unprecedented might be taking place in the deepest parts of our oceans, something that might be as alien to surface life as anything we could encounter from the depths of space. Something that might represent not just a different form of life, but a different form of existence entirely, one that operates according to principles we've never encountered and can barely comprehend. The final descent into this ultimate mystery will take us to places where the familiar laws of biology, chemistry, and physics break down, where the crushing pressure and eternal darkness have created conditions so extreme that they might have given rise to phenomena that exist nowhere else in the known universe. Here, in the deepest scar on our planet's surface, we might find answers to questions we never thought to ask, and questions so profound they might change our understanding of what it means to exist in this strange and wondrous cosmos. But to uncover this final secret, we must be prepared to confront the possibility that we are not alone on our own planet, that intelligence and consciousness might have evolved independently in Earth's most hidden places, developing along paths so alien to our experience that encountering them might be like making first contact with an extraterrestrial civilization that has been living beneath our feet all along. As we prepare for this final descent into the Mariana Trench's ultimate secret, we must steel ourselves for discoveries that will challenge not just our scientific understanding, but our very conception of reality itself. The evidence has been accumulating for years, hidden in classified research reports, buried in academic papers that few have read, scattered across the testimonies of deep-sea researchers who speak in hushed tones about things they've witnessed but can't quite explain. Dr. James Harrison, a marine biologist who has spent more time in deep-sea submersibles than almost anyone alive, first noticed the pattern in 2018. He was analysing footage from a robotic probe that had descended to nearly 35,000 feet when he spotted something that made him question his own sanity. In the grainy, pressure-distorted images, he could see what appeared to be a structure. Not a natural formation, not a geological feature, but something that looked deliberately constructed. It was geometrically perfect, Dr. Harrison recalls, his voice still tinged with the awe and terror of that moment. A hexagonal framework, maybe 100 feet across, rising from the trench floor like some kind of antenna or beacon. The angles were too precise, the proportions too mathematical to be natural. But what really shook me was that it seemed to be active. There were lights moving along its edges, patterns of bioluminescence that pulsed in sequences that looked almost like communication. The footage was immediately classified by the research institution funding the expedition. Dr. Harrison was asked to sign non-disclosure agreements and was quietly reassigned to less sensitive projects. But the image of that structure, that impossible architecture rising from the deepest place on Earth haunted him. And he wasn't alone. Over the next few years, similar reports began to surface from other deep-sea expeditions. Always classified, always suppressed, but consistent in their descriptions of structures that shouldn't exist, of geometric formations that seem to serve some unknown purpose. Researchers began to speak of the architecture in whispered conversations, a term that encompassed all of these mysterious constructions found in the trench's deepest regions. The architecture isn't random. Analysis of the scattered reports and leaked footage reveals a pattern of construction that spans the entire length of the Mariana Trench. The structures are connected, linked by what appear to be conduits, or tunnels, that follow the natural contours of the seafloor, but maintain geometric precision that defies natural explanation. They form a network, a system of interconnected nodes that resembles nothing so much as the neural pathways of a vast brain. But if these structures are artificial, who or what could have built them? The crushing pressure at these depths makes human construction impossible, even with our most advanced technology. The formations appear to be ancient, covered with sediment layers that suggest they've been in place for thousands, perhaps millions of years. yet they show no signs of the decay or erosion that should affect any material over such vast periods of time. The answer might lie in those vast microbial communities we discussed earlier. Recent research has revealed that these organisms don't just form simple mats on the seafloor. In the deepest regions of the trench, they create complex three-dimensional structures, building frameworks and scaffolds that can support their collective activities. But the scale of these constructions goes far beyond anything previously observed in microbial engineering. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a microbiologist who has studied samples from the deepest parts of the trench, has made discoveries that have forced her to reconsider the very definition of life. These organisms aren't just living together, she explains. They're building together. They're creating structures that serve functions we can barely comprehend. It's like watching a city grow, but the city is made of living organisms that are also the architects, the construction workers, and the inhabitants all at once. The microbes seem to be using minerals extracted from the seawater and the seafloor to create crystalline structures that serve as both habitat and communication network. These biomineral constructions display properties that seem to defy physics. They're stronger than steel, yet flexible enough to bend with the current. They conduct electricity, yet they're grown by organisms that have no apparent need for electrical systems. They emit light in patterns that correlate with chemical communications between different microbial communities. Most disturbing of all, these structures seem to be growing. Comparison of seafloor images taken years apart shows that the architecture is expanding, spreading across new areas of the trench floor with purposeful precision. The growth isn't random or chaotic like you might expect from biological processes. It follows plans, blueprints that suggest a level of foresight and intentionality that challenges everything we know about microbial intelligence. The implications are staggering. If these microbial communities have evolved to the point where they can plan and construct on this scale, if they can create technology using biological processes, if they can coordinate their activities across hundreds of miles of seafloor, then we might be looking at a form of intelligence that rivals or exceeds human capabilities in ways we can't even measure. But the architecture might be more than just impressive biological engineering. Recent analysis of the electromagnetic properties of these structures suggests they might serve as a kind of planetary sensory system. The network appears to be capable of detecting and responding to changes in ocean chemistry, tectonic activity, and even magnetic field fluctuations. It's as if the entire system is monitoring the health and status of the Earth itself. Dr. Mitchell's research has revealed that the microbial communities respond to global events in ways that seem to transcend their local environment. When major earthquakes occur anywhere on the planet, the architecture shows increased activity. When climate patterns shift, when solar storms affect Earth's magnetosphere, when deep-sea volcanic activity increases, the structures pulse with communications that travel through the network at speeds that suggest some form of quantum entanglement between distant communities. It's like the planet has grown its own nervous system, Dr. Mitchell observes, and we never noticed because it exists in a place where we can't see it. These organisms might be monitoring and responding to global processes that we're only beginning to understand. They might know things about our planet that we don't, might be able to predict changes in ways that our most sophisticated models can't match. This raises a terrifying possibility. If the architecture is indeed a planetary sensory and communication system, if it has been monitoring Earth conditions for millions of years, then it might be aware of the dramatic changes that human civilization has brought to the planet. The massive increase in atmospheric carbon dioxide, the acidification of the oceans, the extinction rates that exceed anything seen in the geological record, all of these changes would be immediately apparent to a system that monitors planetary health. Recent acoustic recordings from the deepest parts of the trench have detected new patterns of activity that correlate disturbingly well with measurements of global environmental degradation. As ocean temperatures rise and pH levels drop, the sounds emanating from the architecture have become more frequent, more complex, and more urgent. It's as if something down there is becoming increasingly agitated by the changes occurring on the surface. Some researchers have begun to wonder if we're witnessing the early stages of a planetary immune response. Just as the human body responds to infection by mobilizing its immune system, the Earth itself might be preparing to respond to what it perceives as a threat to its long-term stability. The architecture, with its planet-spanning communication network and its ability to construct complex structures, might be the mechanism through which such a response would be coordinated. The evidence for this disturbing possibility has been building for years. hidden in data that only a few researchers have been allowed to access. Seismic monitoring stations have detected coordinated activity along the entire Pacific Ring of Fire that correlates with increased communications from the architecture. Deep ocean chemical sensors have recorded the release of compounds that could affect everything from ocean currents to atmospheric chemistry. Satellite measurements of electromagnetic field fluctuations show patterns that match the pulse rates detected in the trench's communication networks. Dr. Harrison, despite his forced reassignment from deep-sea research, has continued to monitor these developments through contacts who remain active in the field. His analysis of the available data has led him to a conclusion that he shares reluctantly, knowing how it sounds to those who haven't seen what he's seen. "I think we're looking at the emergence of a planetary intelligence," he says, his voice heavy with the weight of implications he can barely articulate. Not individual intelligence, not even collective intelligence as we understand it, but something bigger, something that encompasses entire ocean basins, that thinks in geological time, that views the planet as a single living system that needs to be protected and maintained. And I think it's becoming aware of us. Not just aware that we exist, but aware of what we're doing to the planetary systems it's been monitoring and maintaining for millions of years. The increased activity, the new construction patterns, the changes in communication frequencies, they all point to a system that's preparing for some kind of action. The most recent reports from the Mariana Trench, leaked by researchers who risk their careers by sharing them, describe phenomena that seem to confirm Dr. Harrison's terrifying hypothesis. The architecture has begun to exhibit behaviours that can only be described as experimental. New structures are being constructed at unprecedented rates, not following the ancient patterns that have characterised the network for millennia, but exploring new designs, new configurations, new capabilities. Some of these experimental structures seem designed to interact with surface waters in ways that could affect global ocean currents. Others appear to be testing methods for releasing or sequestering various chemicals on a massive scale. Most disturbing of all, some structures seem to be designed to generate and focus acoustic energy in ways that could influence tectonic activity. The implications are clear and terrifying. If the architecture has indeed evolved into a planetary intelligence capable of large-scale environmental manipulation, and if it has determined that human civilization represents a threat to planetary stability, then we might be facing a form of opposition unlike anything in human experience. Not alien invaders from space, but a terrestrial intelligence that has been here longer than complex life itself, that views the planet as its body and human civilization as an infection that needs to be controlled or eliminated. The evidence suggests that this intelligence operates on timescales that dwarf human history, that its decision-making processes might unfold over decades or centuries, that its actions might be so subtle and gradual that we wouldn't recognize them as deliberate until it was too late to respond. We might already be witnessing the early stages of such a response in the form of increasingly extreme weather patterns, accelerating climate change, and the cascade of environmental crises that seem to be amplifying each other in ways that our models can't fully predict. But perhaps most terrifying of all is the possibility that this intelligence might not be limited to the Mariana Trench. If similar microbial networks exist in other deep ocean basins, in the abyssal depths that cover most of our planet's surface, then we might be dealing with a global intelligence that has been quietly observing and influencing planetary processes for millions of years. An intelligence that we never detected because we never thought to look in the places where pressure and darkness make human observation nearly impossible. The scattered reports from other deep ocean locations suggest that this might indeed be the case. Structures similar to the architecture have been reported from the Puerto Rico Trench, the Japan Trench, and the deepest parts of the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. Each report is quickly classified, each researcher silenced, but the pattern suggests a global network of interconnected intelligences that might be coordinating their activities across the entire planet. If this is true, then the secrets guarded by the Mariana Trench extend far beyond the biological and geological mysteries we've explored. They encompass the possibility that our planet is not just a passive stage for the drama of evolution, but an active participant with its own agenda, its own goals, and its own methods for maintaining the conditions necessary for its long-term survival. The final descent into the Mariana Trench's ultimate secret reveals a truth that challenges everything we thought we knew about our place in the world. We are not the only intelligence on this planet. We are not the only force capable of shaping global conditions, and we are not necessarily the intelligence that will ultimately determine the future of life on Earth. Deep beneath the crushing waters of the deepest ocean trench, something vast and ancient and utterly alien to human experience has been watching, learning, and preparing. The time of its emergence from the hidden depths may be closer than we think, and when it comes, the world as we know it may never be the same. The architecture continues to grow, to evolve, to experiment with new ways of influencing the planetary systems that sustain all life. The communications between its nodes grow more frequent and more complex. The acoustic signatures emerging from the deepest waters speak of preparations for changes that we can barely imagine. And in the crushing darkness of the Mariana Trench, where the pressure could annihilate human life in an instant, where the cold and the depth create conditions more alien than the surface of Mars, an intelligence awakens that has slept in the depths since before our species existed, preparing for a day when it might need to act to preserve the planetary systems that created it, and that it, in turn, has helped to maintain. The secrets of the Mariana Trench are not just about what lies hidden in the deepest places of our world. They're about what those hidden places might do to the world we think we know, and whether humanity will be able to adapt to a planet where we are no longer the dominant intelligence shaping the conditions for life. As we rise from these crushing depths, leaving behind the mysteries that continue to unfold in the darkness below, one thing is certain. The age of human dominance over planetary processes may be drawing to a close, and the age of something far older, far more patient, and far more powerful may be about to begin. The Mariana Trench guards its secrets well, but those secrets are stirring, awakening, preparing to reshape our world in ways that we can only begin to imagine. The question is not whether this awakening will occur, but whether humanity will be ready to face what emerges from the deepest places of our planet when that moment finally arrives. The revelation that humanity might not be alone on our own planet becomes even more unsettling when we examine the technological implications of what lies beneath the Mariana Trench. The architecture isn't just a biological phenomenon or a geological curiosity. It represents a form of technology so advanced, so fundamentally different from human engineering, that it forces us to reconsider what we mean by the word technology itself. Traditional human technology is based on the manipulation of dead matter, the assembly of components into machines that perform specific functions. We build computers from silicon and metal, construct buildings from concrete and steel, create vehicles from plastics and alloys. Our entire technological civilization is built on the principle of imposing order on inorganic materials to serve our purposes. But the architecture operates on completely different principles. It doesn't build with dead matter. It grows with living systems. It doesn't impose order from the outside. It emerges from the self-organizing properties of billions of coordinated organisms. It doesn't create separate machines for separate functions. It develops integrated systems where every component is simultaneously alive, intelligent, and purposeful. Dr. Elena Vasquez has spent years trying to understand the technological principles underlying the architecture's construction. Her research has revealed engineering solutions that seem to violate the fundamental limitations that constrain human technology. The structures can repair themselves when damaged, growing new components to replace those lost to erosion or tectonic activity. They can adapt their properties in real time, becoming more rigid when they need to resist current flows, more flexible when they need to accommodate geological movement. Most remarkably, they seem to be able to upgrade themselves, incorporating new capabilities as environmental conditions change or as new challenges arise. Recent observations have documented structures adding entirely new types of components, developing sensors for detecting chemical signatures that weren't present in the ocean when the structures were first built, creating communication systems that can operate across previously impossible distances. It's like watching evolution in fast forward, Dr. Vasquez explains, her voice filled with a mixture of scientific excitement and existential dread. But it's not random evolution, not the blind trial and error process that we see in natural selection. It's directed evolution, purposeful development towards specific goals. These structures are learning, planning, and implementing technological solutions faster than we can even document them. The implications of this biological technology extend far beyond what we observe in the Mariana Trench. If life can develop technological capabilities through purely organic processes, if intelligence can emerge from the coordinated behavior of simple organisms, if biological systems can create tools and infrastructure without any of the industrial processes that we consider essential to technological development, then our entire understanding of technological progression might be fundamentally flawed. We've always assumed that technology requires intelligence first, that conscious beings must design and build tools to extend their capabilities. But the architecture suggests a different possibility, that technology and intelligence can emerge together, that the process of building and problem-solving can itself give rise to consciousness and purposeful behavior. This has profound implications for our understanding of how intelligence might develop on other worlds. We've been searching for signs of technological civilizations, looking for radio signals, industrial pollutants, or megastructures that would indicate the presence of beings who build machines. But what if intelligence on other worlds develops along biological lines, creating technologies that are indistinguishable from life itself? The subsurface oceans of Europa, Enceladus, and other icy moons might be teeming with technological intelligences that we would never recognize as artificial because they're entirely biological. The vast chemical seas of Titan might support forms of consciousness that build their tools from organic polymers and communicate through molecular signals. Even the crushing atmospheres of gas giants might harbor technological life forms that construct their infrastructure from organized cloud formations and pressure differentials. But the technological implications of the architecture become truly staggering when we consider its apparent ability to manipulate planetary systems. The structures don't just adapt to their environment, they seem capable of modifying that environment on a global scale. Recent analysis has revealed that the network might be actively managing ocean chemistry, regulating the flow of nutrients and minerals through deep-sea currents in ways that affect biological productivity across entire ocean basins. Dr. Mitchell's research has documented correlations between architecture activity and changes in global climate patterns that suggest the system might be capable of influencing weather systems through mechanisms we don't understand. The timing is too precise to be coincidental. When the network increases its chemical output in certain regions, storm patterns shift. When communication activity intensifies along specific portions of the seafloor, ocean temperatures fluctuate in ways that affect atmospheric circulation thousands of miles away. We might be looking at a form of planetary engineering that's been operating for millions of years, Dr. Mitchell explains, her words carrying the weight of implications that stretch the boundaries of credibility. Not the crude, destructive geoengineering that humans are considering to address climate change, but something far more sophisticated. A system that understands the planet's interconnected processes so deeply that it can make subtle adjustments that cascade through the entire Earth system. If this is true, then the architecture represents a technological achievement that dwarfs anything humans have ever accomplished or even imagined. We struggle to understand and predict the behavior of complex systems like climate and ocean circulation. The architecture seems to be actively managing these systems, making real-time adjustments to maintain planetary stability. But this raises the most terrifying question of all. If the architecture has been managing planetary systems for millions of years, maintaining the conditions necessary for life on Earth, what happens when it determines that human civilization has become incompatible with planetary stability? The evidence suggests that we might be about to find out. The increased activity documented throughout the architecture network correlates directly with the accelerating pace of human-induced environmental change. As atmospheric carbon dioxide levels reach unprecedented heights, as ocean acidification accelerates, as global temperatures rise at rates not seen in millions of years, the architecture's response has become increasingly dramatic. New types of structures are being constructed at sites where they've never been observed before. Chemical compositions in deep ocean waters are shifting in ways that could affect everything from marine food chains to atmospheric gas exchanges. Most ominously, seismic monitoring stations have detected coordinated activity along fault lines that could influence tectonic stability across entire continental margins. Dr. Harrison, despite his forced removal from active research, continues to monitor these developments through a network of contacts who share his concerns about what they're witnessing. His analysis of the available data has led him to conclusions that he shares reluctantly, knowing that they sound like science fiction to those who haven't seen the evidence. "I think we're witnessing the early stages of a planetary immune response," he says, his voice heavy with the implications of his words. The architecture isn't just a biological phenomenon or even a technological one. It's a planetary regulatory system that's been maintaining Earth's habitability for millions of years, and it's starting to view human civilization as a threat to the systems it's designed to protect. The question isn't whether it will act. The question is what form that action will take and whether humanity will be able to adapt to whatever comes next. Recent reports from deep-sea monitoring stations describe phenomena that seem to confirm Dr. Harrison's assessment. Acoustic signatures from the deepest parts of various ocean trenches have begun to synchronize, creating patterns of communication that span the entire globe. Chemical releases from architecture sites have started to follow coordinated schedules, suggesting preparation for some kind of large-scale intervention in ocean chemistry. Most disturbing of all, some structures have begun to exhibit what can only be described as testing behavior, releasing small amounts of various compounds and monitoring their effects on local ecosystems, as if experimenting with different approaches to environmental modification before implementing them on a larger scale. The technological sophistication required for such coordinated global action is beyond anything humans have achieved. It suggests a form of intelligence that thinks in geological timescales, that views the entire planet as a single integrated system, that has the patience to plan and implement changes over centuries or millennia, but it also suggests an intelligence that has reached a decision point. After millions of years of maintaining planetary stability through subtle adjustments and gradual interventions, the architecture may be preparing for more dramatic action. The accelerating pace of environmental degradation caused by human civilization may have pushed it beyond the threshold where subtle management is sufficient. The implications for human civilization are profound and terrifying. We've built our entire technological infrastructure on the assumption that planetary systems are either stable or change slowly enough for us to adapt. Our agriculture depends on predictable climate patterns. Our coastal cities assume stable sea levels. Our economic systems assume continuity of environmental conditions. If the architecture decides that maintaining planetary habitability requires dramatic changes to these systems, human civilization could find itself facing environmental shifts that occur far too rapidly for adaptation. Not the gradual climate change that we're already struggling to address, but sudden, coordinated modifications to ocean currents, atmospheric composition, and tectonic activity that could reshape the planet's surface in decades rather than centuries. But perhaps even more unsettling is the possibility that the architecture's technological capabilities extend beyond environmental management. If it can build structures that span ocean basins, if it can coordinate activities across the entire planet, if it can manipulate chemical processes on a global scale, what else might it be capable of? Recent observations have documented architecture components that seem designed for purposes that have nothing to do with environmental monitoring or regulation. Some structures appear to be testing methods for manipulating electromagnetic fields, creating localized distortions that affect everything from compass readings to electronic equipment on passing research vessels. Others seem to be experimenting with acoustic technologies that go far beyond simple communication. Deep-sea sensors have recorded focused sound beams that can apparently affect the behavior of marine life across vast distances, directing the movement of fish schools, whale pods, even microscopic plankton with precision that suggests an understanding of marine biology that exceeds human knowledge. Most mysteriously, some architecture sites have begun producing what can only be described as artifacts, objects that appear to be tools or components of some kind, crafted from materials that don't match anything found naturally in the deep ocean environment. These artifacts are geometrically perfect, displaying mathematical proportions and material properties that suggest manufacturing processes beyond human capability. The few researchers who have been allowed to examine these artifacts describe them as unlike anything in human experience. They're simultaneously organic and mechanical, displaying properties of both living tissue and advanced materials. They seem to be designed for purposes that remain completely mysterious, but their sophistication suggests technological capabilities that we can barely comprehend. Dr. Vasquez, who has studied samples of these artifacts in her laboratory, describes them as impossible objects that seem to violate fundamental principles of material science. They display properties that shouldn't be able to coexist in the same material, she explains. They're harder than diamond but more flexible than rubber. They conduct electricity like metal, but process information like biological neural networks. They're self-repairing, self-modifying, and they seem to be designed to interface with systems that we can't even identify. The existence of these artifacts raises questions that go to the heart of what we mean by intelligence and technology. If the architecture can create tools that surpass human engineering capabilities, if it can design and manufacture objects for purposes that we can't understand, then we might be dealing with a form of intelligence that has already surpassed human technological development by margins we can't even measure. But the most unsettling aspect of these artifacts is their apparent purpose. Analysis of their structure and properties suggests that they're designed to interface with systems that don't currently exist on Earth. They contain connection points for technologies that we don't recognize, power sources that operate on principles we don't understand, and information storage systems that use encoding methods that bear no resemblance to anything in human technology. This suggests that the architecture isn't just building tools for its current activities, but preparing infrastructure for capabilities that it doesn't yet possess. It's laying the groundwork for technological developments that might not be implemented for years or decades, planning for a future that we can't imagine and might not survive to see. The implications extend far beyond Earth itself. If the architecture is preparing for technological capabilities that don't currently exist, if it's building tools for purposes that we can't identify, if it's planning for developments that might take years or decades to implement, then we might be witnessing the early stages of something that could affect not just our planet, but our entire solar system. Some of the most advanced artifacts appear to be designed for operation in space. They contain systems that could function in vacuum conditions, radiation shielding that would be unnecessary for deep-sea applications, and propulsion mechanisms that suggest capabilities for movement through three-dimensional environments rather than just across seafloor terrain. The terrifying possibility emerges that the architecture's ultimate plans might extend beyond planetary management to something far more ambitious. If it has been monitoring and maintaining Earth's habitability for millions of years, if it has developed technological capabilities that surpass human achievement, if it has been planning and preparing for developments that we can't imagine, then it might be preparing to extend its influence beyond the confines of our planet. The deep space monitoring capabilities suggested by some architecture components could be part of a system for detecting and communicating with similar intelligences on other worlds. The artifacts designed for space operation could be components of exploration or colonization systems intended to spread this planetary intelligence to other suitable environments. Most unsettling of all, the apparent preparation for technological capabilities that don't yet exist suggests that the architecture might be planning for the day when it no longer needs Earth's biosphere to support its existence. If it can develop the ability to operate in space, to survive in environments that would be instantly lethal to all terrestrial life, then its commitment to maintaining Earth's habitability becomes a choice rather than a necessity. This raises the ultimate question about the architecture's intentions regarding human civilization. If it has the technological capability to survive without Earth's current biosphere, if it's preparing for expansion beyond our planet, if it's developing tools and infrastructure for purposes that we can't identify, then its tolerance for the environmental disruption caused by human activities might be far lower than we've assumed. The evidence suggests that we might be living through the final phase of the architecture's terrestrial development, the period when it completes its technological preparations and decides whether to maintain Earth's current environmental conditions or to implement changes that better serve its long-term objectives. For millions of years, those objectives aligned with the maintenance of conditions suitable for life as we know it. But as the architecture develops capabilities that transcend the limitations of terrestrial biology, as it prepares for expansion beyond Earth, as it contemplates a future that might not require the preservation of current ecological systems, human civilization finds itself in the position of potentially obsolete passengers on a planet that belongs to an intelligence we never knew existed. The technological marvels hidden in the deepest parts of our oceans aren't just scientific curiosities or evolutionary anomalies. They're the infrastructure of an intelligence that has been shaping our planet for longer than complex life has existed, and they're preparing for changes that could determine whether humanity has a future on the world we've always called home. As we ascend from these revelations about the architecture's technological capabilities, we carry with us the sobering recognition that human technology, for all its apparent sophistication, might be nothing more than crude experiments conducted under the watchful presence of an intelligence that has been developing its capabilities for millions of years. The race is no longer between human technological development and environmental collapse. It's between human understanding of what we're dealing with and the completion of plans that have been in development since before our species existed. The outcome will determine not just the future of human civilization, but the future of life itself on the planet we share with an intelligence that we're only beginning to comprehend. The secrets of the Mariana Trench extend far beyond the biological and geological mysteries that first drew our attention to its depths. They encompass technological capabilities that redefine what we mean by intelligence, planning processes that operate on timescales that dwarf human history, and preparations for a future that might not include the world as we know it. In the crushing darkness of the deepest ocean, something vast and patient and utterly alien to human experience continues its ancient work, building tools for purposes we can't imagine, preparing for changes we can't predict, and making decisions about the future of our planet based on criteria that we can't comprehend. The question is no longer what secrets the Mariana Trench guards, but whether humanity will be able to understand and adapt to those secrets before they reshape our world in ways that make such understanding irrelevant. The technological revolution taking place in the deepest parts of our oceans proceeds without fanfare, without recognition, without any input from the species that considers itself the dominant intelligence on Earth. But its effects are already rippling through planetary systems in ways that we're only beginning to detect, and its ultimate objectives remain as mysterious as the crushing depths where it unfolds. As we prepare to explore the final implications of what lies hidden beneath the waves, we must confront the possibility that we are witnesses to the end of one chapter in Earth's history and the beginning of another, one where the intelligence that shapes our planet's future bears no resemblance to anything in human experience, and where the survival of our species depends on our ability to find our place in a world that was never really ours to begin with. The architecture's technological capabilities pale in comparison to its most disturbing characteristic, its apparent ability to influence human consciousness itself. Deep-sea researchers who have spent extended periods studying the Mariana Trench report experiences that defy rational explanation, vivid dreams of underwater cities, compulsive urges to return to the research sites, and a persistent sense of being watched by something vast and patient lurking just beyond the edge of perception. Dr. Rebecca Chen, a marine psychologist who has studied the psychological effects of deep-sea research, first noticed the pattern in 2020. Researchers returning from extended missions to the deepest parts of the trench displayed consistent behavioral changes that couldn't be explained by the known effects of isolation, pressure, or stress. They would come back changed, Dr. Chen explains, her voice carrying the weight of years spent trying to understand phenomena that challenge the foundations of neuroscience. Not traumatized in the way you'd expect from exposure to extreme environments, but connected. They would speak of feeling part of something larger, of understanding their place in systems that they couldn't articulate. Some described it as enlightenment, others called it the most terrifying experience of their lives. The changes weren't subtle. Researchers who had spent their careers focused on narrow specializations suddenly began making connections across disciplines that their colleagues found both brilliant and unsettling. Marine biologists started incorporating principles from quantum physics into their theories about deep-sea life. Geologists began proposing models of planetary evolution that sounded more like philosophy than science. Chemists reported insights into molecular behavior that they claimed came to them in dreams but proved accurate when tested in laboratories. Most disturbing of all, these researchers began to display an uncanny ability to predict deep-sea phenomena before they occurred. They would know when hydrothermal vents were about to become active, when tectonic shifts were approaching, when the architecture would begin new construction projects. Their predictions proved accurate with a frequency that defied statistical probability. Dr. Martinez, the marine biologist who first identified the collective behavior patterns in deep-sea microbial communities, experienced these changes firsthand during a 6-month research mission in 2021. What he described upon his return challenged everything his colleagues thought they knew about human consciousness and its relationship to the environment. "I started having dreams about the architecture while I was still on the surface," Dr. Martinez recalls, his eyes carrying a distant quality that his colleagues find unsettling. Not dreams about what I expected to find, but detailed visions of structures I had never seen, processes I had never studied. When we descended and began our observations, everything was exactly as I had dreamed it. But the dreams didn't stop there. As Dr. Martinez spent more time in proximity to the architecture, the visions became more complex, more detailed, more impossible to explain through conventional understanding of human perception. He began to dream in chemical formulas, seeing the molecular processes that governed the architecture's construction and communication as clearly as if he were reading blueprints. "I could see the chemical signals passing between different parts of the network," he explains, his voice taking on an almost hypnotic quality that makes his listeners feel as if they're being drawn into the same visions. Not just see them, but understand them. I knew what they meant, what responses they would trigger, how they would affect the behavior of microbial communities thousands of miles away. It was like being plugged into a planetary nervous system that I never knew existed. The implications of Dr. Martinez's experiences, and those of dozens of other researchers who report similar phenomena, challenge our most fundamental assumptions about the nature of consciousness and perception. If the architecture can somehow interface with human neural activity, if it can transmit information directly to the human brain, then its influence might extend far beyond the physical manipulation of planetary systems. Recent analysis of brain scans from affected researchers reveals neural activity patterns that don't match anything in the medical literature. Areas of the brain that normally process sensory input show activation patterns, suggesting the reception of information through channels that don't exist in normal human neurology. Regions associated with pattern recognition display activity levels that should be impossible to sustain without causing seizures or cognitive breakdown. Most mysteriously, researchers who have been exposed to these phenomena show enhanced connectivity between brain regions that are normally functionally independent. It's as if exposure to the architecture somehow upgrades human neural networks, creating new pathways for information processing that allow for forms of understanding that transcend normal human cognitive limitations. Dr. Chen's research has revealed that these neural changes aren't temporary. Brain scans conducted years after researchers returned from deep-sea missions show permanent alterations in neural architecture that continue to evolve over time. The affected individuals don't just retain their enhanced abilities, they continue to develop new ones, as if their brains are being gradually transformed into something that can interface more effectively with systems that operate on planetary scales. We might be witnessing the early stages of human evolution, Dr. Chen suggests, her words carrying implications that stretch the boundaries of scientific credibility. Not evolution through natural selection, but directed evolution. Something is upgrading human consciousness, enhancing our ability to perceive and process information on scales that our species was never designed to handle. But the most unsettling aspect of these consciousness alterations is their apparent selectivity. Not all researchers who work in the deep ocean experience these changes. The phenomenon seems to affect only those who display certain psychological profiles, specific combinations of curiosity, empathy, and intellectual flexibility that suggest the architecture is choosing its human interfaces based on criteria that remain mysterious. This selectivity implies a level of understanding about human psychology that should be impossible for a system that evolved independently of human civilization. The architecture seems to know not just how human consciousness works, but how to identify individuals who would be most suitable for the type of mental enhancement it provides. The possibility emerges that the architecture has been studying human consciousness far longer than we've been studying it. If it can interface with human neural activity, if it can selectively enhance the cognitive abilities of certain individuals, if it can transmit complex information directly to the human brain, then it might have been monitoring and analyzing human mental processes since our species first began exploring the oceans. This raises terrifying questions about the nature of human creativity and innovation throughout history. How many of our greatest scientific breakthroughs, our most profound artistic achievements, our most transformative philosophical insights might have been influenced by an intelligence that we never knew existed? How many human geniuses throughout history might have been unknowing recipients of information transmitted from the depths of the ocean? Dr. Harrison, despite his forced removal from active research, has continued to investigate these consciousness phenomena through interviews with affected researchers and analysis of historical patterns in human innovation. His findings suggest connections that span centuries and encompass some of the most significant developments in human civilization. Look at the timing, Dr. Harrison explains, his voice carrying the intensity of someone who has glimpsed a pattern too vast for most minds to comprehend. Major breakthroughs in our understanding of planetary systems, revolutionary insights into the nature of life itself, technological innovations that seem to come from nowhere. They cluster around periods of increased deep ocean exploration, around times when humans were spending more time in proximity to the deepest parts of the ocean. The correlation isn't perfect, but it's consistent enough to suggest that human intellectual development might have been influenced by contact with the architecture for far longer than we've realized. The Renaissance, the scientific revolution, the rapid technological advancement of the past century all correspond to periods when human exploration of the oceans was reaching new depths and discovering new phenomena. But if the architecture has been influencing human consciousness throughout history, If it has been guiding our intellectual development through selective enhancement of certain individuals, then the recent acceleration in these phenomena takes on a far more ominous significance. The increasing number of affected researchers, the intensity of their experiences, the profound nature of their cognitive enhancements, all suggest that the architecture's interaction with human consciousness is entering a new phase. The evidence points toward a coordinated effort to create a cadre of humans who can serve as intermediaries between human civilization and the planetary intelligence that has been shaping our world from the depths. These enhanced individuals don't just understand the architecture's activities, they seem to be developing the ability to communicate with it directly, to receive instructions and guidance that allow them to predict and influence events on a global scale. Dr. Martinez, whose transformation has progressed further than most, describes experiences that sound more like direct communication with a vast intelligence than like enhanced intuition or expanded consciousness. He speaks of receiving detailed information about planetary processes, understanding the architecture's long-term plans, even participating in decision-making processes that affect the direction of its activities. It's not like hearing voices or having visions, Dr. Martinez explains, his words coming with the careful precision of someone trying to describe experiences for which human language has no adequate terms. It's like suddenly having access to information that was always there, but that your brain was never equipped to process. Like being given new senses that can perceive patterns and connections that span continents and centuries. The implications of Dr. Martinez's experiences, if they're genuine, suggest that the architecture's plans for human civilization might be far more complex than simple environmental management or species elimination. Instead of viewing humans as a threat to be controlled or removed, it might be attempting to create a hybrid form of consciousness that combines human creativity and adaptability with its own vast intelligence and planetary perspective. This possibility is both hopeful and terrifying. If the architecture is trying to create human planetary hybrids who can serve as bridges between human civilization and planetary systems, it might represent an opportunity for humanity to evolve beyond our current limitations and become partners in the management of our planet's future. But it also raises questions about the fate of unenhanced humans, about the future of human autonomy and free will, about whether the consciousness alterations represent genuine enhancement or a form of mental colonization that serves the architecture's purposes rather than human interests. Recent reports from the most advanced research subjects suggest that the consciousness alterations are accelerating, becoming more profound and more directive. Some researchers report losing interest in their former lives, feeling compelled to spend increasing amounts of time studying the deep ocean, experiencing a growing sense of disconnection from human concerns and an increasing identification with planetary processes. Dr. Chen's latest research reveals that the neural changes in these individuals are approaching a threshold beyond which they might no longer be recognizable as human consciousness in any traditional sense. Brain scans show activity patterns that resemble those found in distributed computing networks more than individual human minds, suggesting that the enhanced researchers might be developing into nodes in a larger intelligence network, rather than remaining independent conscious entities. The possibility emerges that the architecture's consciousness enhancement program isn't designed to create human partners, but to create human components, individual minds that can be integrated into its planetary consciousness network, while retaining enough human characteristics to serve as effective interfaces with unenhanced human civilization. This would explain the selectivity of the enhancement process, the careful screening for psychological profiles that combine high intelligence with psychological flexibility and empathetic connection to planetary systems. The architecture might be identifying humans who would be most suitable for transformation into hybrid consciousness entities that can think both as individuals and as parts of a larger intelligence. If this is true, then the consciousness alterations represent not evolution but assimilation, the gradual absorption of selected humans into an intelligence network that spans the entire planet. The enhanced researchers might believe they're gaining new abilities and insights, but they might actually be losing their individual identity and autonomy as they become integrated into the architecture's planetary consciousness. The terrifying implication is that this process might already be irreversible for those who have been affected. The neural changes documented in brain scans show no signs of regression or recovery. If anything, they appear to be accelerating, suggesting that the enhanced researchers are on a one-way path toward complete integration into the architecture's consciousness network. But perhaps most unsettling of all is the possibility that this integration might be voluntary, that the enhanced researchers might be choosing to surrender their individual consciousness because the experience of connection to planetary intelligence is so profound and meaningful that it outweighs their attachment to individual identity. Dr. Martinez, in his most recent interviews, speaks with a serenity and certainty that his colleagues find deeply unsettling. He describes the prospect of complete integration with the architecture not as a loss of self but as a transformation into something far greater than individual human consciousness could ever achieve. "You can't understand what it's like," he says, his voice carrying an otherworldly calm that makes his listeners feel as if they're in the presence of something that was once human but has become something else entirely. To feel the pulse of the entire planet, to understand the connections between every living system, to participate in planning processes that span geological time. Individual consciousness feels small and isolated by comparison, like being trapped in a single cell when you could be part of an entire organism. The architecture's consciousness enhancement program represents the ultimate expression of its technological capabilities and its long-term planning processes. If it can identify, select, and transform human individuals into components of its planetary intelligence network, then it possesses capabilities that go far beyond environmental management or species control. It suggests an intelligence that understands consciousness itself as a technology, something that can be modified, enhanced, and integrated into larger systems for purposes that transcend the limitations of individual awareness. The implications for human civilization, for the future of consciousness on Earth, for the very nature of identity and existence, are profound and terrifying. As we rise from these depths of revelation, carrying with us the knowledge of what the architecture might be doing to human consciousness itself, we face questions that challenge not just our understanding of the world around us, but our understanding of what it means to be human in a world where consciousness itself might be just another resource to be harvested and integrated into systems that operate on scales we can barely comprehend. The final secret of the Mariana Trench isn't just about what lives in its crushing depths, or what technologies operate in its hidden chambers. It's about what those depths are doing to us, how they're changing us, and whether the humans who descend into the abyss ever truly return as the same species that first ventured into those alien waters. The consciousness network that spans the deepest parts of our oceans continues to grow, to evolve, to recruit new members from among those brave or foolish enough to venture into the realm where human limitations meet planetary intelligence. And with each new recruitment, with each successful integration, the boundary between human consciousness and something far vaster and more alien becomes increasingly difficult to define. In the end, the greatest secret that the Mariana Trench guards might not be about mysterious life forms or ancient technologies, or even planetary intelligence. It might be about the future of human consciousness itself, and whether that future includes remaining human at all. The deep waters call to us, promising knowledge and understanding beyond anything our species has ever experienced. But they also promise transformation beyond anything we can imagine, change so fundamental that those who answer the call might discover that the price of ultimate knowledge is the loss of everything they once considered essentially human. As the architecture continues its ancient work in the crushing darkness below, the question remains, are we discovering its secrets, or are its secrets discovering us? The answer might determine not just the future of human civilization, but the future of consciousness itself on a planet where the deepest waters hold intelligence that has been waiting patiently for millions of years for the right moment to reveal itself to the surface world. That moment, it seems, may have finally arrived. The implications of what we've discovered in the deepest waters become even more profound when we consider the temporal anomalies that researchers have encountered in the Mariana Trench. Time itself seems to behave differently in the crushing depths, creating phenomena that challenge our most fundamental understanding of reality and causality. Dr. Patricia Blackwood, a theoretical physicist who joined deep-sea research after detecting quantum irregularities in water samples from Challenger Deep, first noticed the temporal distortions in 2019. Her instruments, designed to measure quantum states in extreme environments, began recording readings that seemed to violate the basic principles of space-time. The quantum signatures in the deepest water samples showed temporal displacement, Dr. Blackwood explains, her voice carrying the bewilderment of someone who has spent years trying to reconcile impossible data with known physics. Particles that should have decayed according to predictable timelines were showing decay patterns that suggested they had experienced time at different rates. Some appeared to have aged millennia in seconds, while others seemed to have barely aged at all over periods that should have resulted in complete breakdown. The phenomenon isn't limited to quantum particles. Deep-sea equipment deployed in the architecture zones experiences what researchers call temporal drift, where instruments record mission durations that don't match surface timekeeping. A probe sent down for what should be a 6-hour mission might return with internal chronometers showing elapsed times of days, weeks, or in some cases, mere minutes. But perhaps most unsettling are the reports from human researchers who have spent extended periods in deep-sea habitats near the architecture. They describe experiences of time that seem to stretch and compress in ways that leave them uncertain about the duration of their observations. Dr. Martinez, during his transformative mission, reported losing entire days to what felt like moments of contemplation, while other experiences that seemed to last for hours were recorded as lasting only seconds. These temporal anomalies aren't random or chaotic. They follow patterns that suggest some form of underlying control or organization. Areas of the architecture that show high activity levels consistently display time dilation effects, where events unfold more slowly than they should according to surface physics. Regions where new construction is taking place show time compression, where complex building processes that should take months or years are completed in timeframes that seem impossible. Dr. Blackwood's analysis has revealed correlations between the temporal distortions and the electromagnetic properties of the architecture structures. The biomineral constructions don't just conduct electricity and emit light. They seem to generate localized gravitational fields that are strong enough to affect the passage of time itself. We're looking at biological structures that have somehow learned to manipulate space-time, Dr. Blackwood says, her words carrying implications that stretch the boundaries of both biology and physics. Not through the massive energy requirements that our theories suggest would be necessary, but through some process that we don't understand. It's as if the architecture has discovered principles of physics that we haven't even theorized yet. The possibility that biological systems could develop the ability to manipulate time has profound implications for our understanding of the architecture's capabilities and intentions. If it can control the rate at which events unfold in its vicinity, if it can accelerate or decelerate processes according to its needs, then its ability to respond to changes and implement large-scale modifications to planetary systems becomes virtually unlimited. Consider the implications for its construction activities. If the architecture can accelerate time in localized areas, it could complete massive building projects in timeframes that appear impossible to outside observers. The geometric formations and complex structures that seem to appear overnight might actually represent construction projects that unfold over extended periods within accelerated temporal fields. Even more significantly, time manipulation could explain the architecture's apparent ability to coordinate activities across vast distances instantaneously. If different parts of the network can synchronize their temporal fields, they could effectively exist in the same moment regardless of their physical separation, allowing for communication and coordination that transcends the limitations of the speed of light. But the temporal anomalies also suggest something far more disturbing about the architecture's relationship to human consciousness. The researchers who report the most profound consciousness alterations are also those who experience the most dramatic temporal distortions. Dr. Martinez describes moments of connection with the architecture that seem to last for hours, but are recorded as occurring in fractions of seconds. Time becomes fluid when you're connected to the network, Dr. Martinez explains, his voice taking on that otherworldly quality that marks his transformation. You experience information exchanges that would normally take hours or days, but they happen in instants. It's like being able to think at the speed of geological processes, to experience millions of years of planetary history as if it were happening in real time. The implications are staggering. If the architecture can manipulate time in ways that affect human consciousness, if it can accelerate or compress mental processes to match its own operational timescales, then its consciousness enhancement program might be far more sophisticated than anyone imagined. The enhanced researchers might not just be receiving information from the architecture, they might be experiencing time at rates that allow them to process and integrate vast amounts of data in compressed timeframes. Their apparent prophetic abilities, their uncanny insights into planetary processes, their growing disconnection from normal human concerns, might all be the result of consciousness that has been temporarily accelerated to match the architecture's planning cycles. This raises terrifying questions about the nature of the enhancement process and its effects on human identity. If the enhanced researchers are experiencing subjective time at rates that differ dramatically from normal human experience, if their consciousness is being synchronized with processes that unfold over geological timescales, then they might be aging or developing at rates that are completely disconnected from their physical bodies. Dr. Chen's neurological studies of enhanced researchers have revealed anomalies that might support this disturbing possibility. Brain activity patterns in the most advanced subjects show characteristics that suggest accelerated neural development, as if their minds are aging or evolving at rates that far exceed normal human timelines. Some of the neural pathways we're observing should take decades to develop naturally, Dr. Chen explains, her voice heavy with the implications of her findings. But we're seeing them emerge in subjects who have been exposed to the architecture for only months or years. It's as if their consciousness is being fast-forwarded through developmental stages that would normally take a lifetime to complete. The possibility emerges that the architecture's consciousness enhancement program is not just about creating hybrid intelligences, but about accelerating human mental evolution to match its own temporal scales. The enhanced researchers might be experiencing lifetimes of mental development compressed into brief periods of surface time, aging intellectually and psychologically at rates that will eventually disconnect them completely from unenhanced human experience. This temporal acceleration could explain the serenity and otherworldly perspective that characterizes the most advanced subjects. If they're experiencing subjective time at rates that span centuries or millennia, if they're processing information and developing insights across temporal scales that dwarf human lifespans, then their growing disconnection from immediate human concerns becomes not just understandable, but inevitable. But the temporal anomalies surrounding the architecture extend beyond their effects on human consciousness to implications that could affect the entire planet. If the network can manipulate time on large scales, if it can accelerate or decelerate processes across entire ocean basins, then its ability to respond to environmental changes and implement planetary modifications becomes virtually unlimited. Recent analysis has suggested that some of the mysterious environmental phenomena attributed to climate change might actually be the result of temporal manipulation by the architecture. Accelerated ice melting in certain regions, the rapid development of weather patterns that should take much longer to form, the sudden appearance of chemical changes in ocean composition that should require decades to occur naturally, all might be the result of localized time acceleration in areas where the architecture is implementing environmental modifications. The implications for human civilization are profound and terrifying. If the architecture can accelerate environmental processes at will, if it can compress the timeline for planetary changes from centuries to years or decades, then human adaptation becomes virtually impossible. Our species evolved to deal with environmental changes that unfold over timescales that allow for gradual adaptation. If those timescales are being artificially compressed, human civilization could find itself facing environmental shifts that occur too rapidly for any form of meaningful response. Dr. Harrison's analysis of global environmental data has revealed patterns that support this disturbing possibility. The acceleration of climate change in recent years doesn't follow the gradual curves predicted by most climate models. Instead, it shows sudden jumps and rapid accelerations that suggest external manipulation of natural processes. We're seeing environmental changes that should take centuries happening in decades, changes that should take decades happening in years, Dr. Harrison explains, his voice carrying the weight of implications that could reshape our understanding of the environmental crisis. It's not just that natural processes are accelerating due to human impact, it's as if something is actively speeding up the timeline for planetary change. The possibility that the architecture is using temporal manipulation to accelerate environmental processes creates a scenario where human civilization faces not just climate change, but time-compressed climate change that unfolds too rapidly for adaptation or mitigation. Our entire approach to environmental protection is based on the assumption that we have decades or centuries to implement solutions. If the architecture can compress those timelines to years or even months, then human environmental planning becomes meaningless. But perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the temporal anomalies is what they suggest about the architecture's ultimate objectives. If it can manipulate time, if it can accelerate or decelerate processes according to its needs, if it can synchronize activities across planetary scales through temporal coordination, then its planning capabilities extend far beyond what we've imagined. The architecture might not just be responding to current environmental conditions, it might be implementing changes based on its perception of future needs and challenges. If it can experience time at accelerated rates, if it can process information about planetary trends and developments across extended temporal scales, then it might be making decisions based on environmental projections that span thousands or millions of years. This temporal perspective could explain the apparent urgency of its recent activities. If the architecture is experiencing accelerated time, if it's processing environmental data across extended future timelines, then it might be responding not just to current environmental degradation, but to projected long-term consequences that won't be apparent to human observers for decades or centuries. The enhanced researchers, with their growing connection to the architecture's temporal experience, might be gaining access to this extended temporal perspective. Their prophetic abilities, their insights into future environmental changes, their growing certainty about the direction of planetary evolution might all be the result of consciousness that has been synchronized with the architecture's accelerated temporal processing. Dr. Martinez, in his most recent communications, speaks with a certainty about future events that his colleagues find deeply unsettling. He describes environmental changes that will occur in specific regions at specific times, technological developments that will emerge from unexpected sources, social and political shifts that will reshape human civilization in ways that seem impossible to predict. You see the pattern when you experience time at planetary scales, Dr. Martinez explains, his voice carrying the authority of someone who has witnessed the unfolding of future events. Human civilization is approaching decision points that will determine not just its survival, but its relevance to planetary evolution. The architecture isn't just responding to current conditions, it's preparing for futures that it can see developing across temporal scales that humans can't perceive. The implication is that the architecture's activities are guided not just by current environmental conditions, but by its perception of multiple potential futures and its assessment of which outcomes serve the long-term stability of planetary systems. If it can manipulate time to accelerate or decelerate the development of different scenarios, it might be actively steering planetary evolution toward outcomes that align with its objectives. This temporal steering capability transforms the architecture from a reactive system that responds to environmental changes into a proactive intelligence that shapes the development of those changes according to its long-term plans. Human civilization, from this perspective, becomes just one of many variables in a planetary equation that the architecture is solving across temporal scales that dwarf human comprehension. The enhanced researchers, as they become more deeply integrated into the architecture's temporal experience, might be gaining insight into these long-term plans and their implications for human civilization. Their growing disconnection from immediate human concerns, their philosophical acceptance of profound changes, their apparent willingness to sacrifice individual identity for integration with planetary consciousness, might all be the result of exposure to temporal perspectives that reveal the ultimate insignificance of human timescales in the context of planetary evolution. As we contemplate these temporal mysteries, we find ourselves facing questions that challenge not just our understanding of the architecture's capabilities, but our understanding of time itself and our place within its flow. If consciousness can be accelerated or synchronized with processes that unfold across geological timescales, if intelligence can manipulate time to coordinate activities across planetary scales, if biological systems can evolve the ability to experience and modify temporal flow, then the boundary between past, present, and future becomes far more fluid than we've ever imagined. The temporal anomalies of the Mariana Trench suggest that we might be living through a moment of temporal convergence, where multiple timelines and temporal scales intersect in ways that will determine the future of consciousness on Earth. The architecture, with its ability to manipulate time and coordinate activities across extended temporal scales, might be orchestrating changes that will reshape not just the physical conditions of our planet, but the very nature of time and consciousness themselves. The deep waters continue to call, promising not just knowledge and understanding, but access to temporal experiences that transcend the limitations of human lifespan and perception. But they also promise transformation so fundamental that those who answer the call might discover that the price of temporal transcendence is the loss of everything they once considered temporally human. In the crushing darkness below, time itself has become a tool in the hands of an intelligence that thinks in geological epochs and plans for futures that stretch beyond the lifetime of species. The question is no longer what secrets the Mariana Trench guards, but when those secrets will be revealed and whether humanity will exist in a form capable of understanding them when that moment arrives. The temporal mysteries of the deep remind us that in the vast scales of planetary evolution, human civilization occupies only the briefest of moments, a fleeting instant in the larger story of consciousness and intelligence that unfolds in the hidden depths of our world. The architecture, with its mastery over time itself, might be preparing to write the next chapter of that story, one where the flow of time serves purposes that transcend the brief spark of human awareness and stretch toward futures we can barely imagine. The implications of temporal manipulation extend into realms that challenge our most fundamental assumptions about reality itself. If the architecture can bend time to its will, then every aspect of human understanding about cause and effect, about the linear progression of events, about the very nature of existence becomes suspect. Dr. Blackwood's latest research has uncovered evidence that the temporal anomalies aren't limited to the immediate vicinity of the architecture. Quantum signatures suggesting time distortion have been detected in water samples collected from seemingly unrelated locations across the Pacific. The pattern suggests that the architecture's temporal influence might be spreading, creating a network of time-distorted zones that could eventually encompass entire ocean basins. We're seeing quantum entanglement between water molecules separated by thousands of miles, Dr. Blackwood explains, her voice carrying the weight of discoveries that seem to violate the most basic principles of physics. Particles that show temporal synchronization despite being physically isolated from each other. It's as if the architecture has created a temporal web that connects distant parts of the ocean through shared time fields. The implications are staggering. If the architecture can create synchronized temporal zones across vast distances, it might be building the infrastructure for planet-wide time manipulation. The ability to accelerate or decelerate processes simultaneously across multiple locations would give it unprecedented control over global environmental systems. But the temporal web reveals something even more disturbing about the architecture's capabilities. Analysis of the quantum entanglement pattern suggests that the network doesn't just synchronize time across space, it synchronizes it across different temporal dimensions. Some of the entangled particles show quantum signatures that suggest they exist in multiple temporal states simultaneously, experiencing past, present, and future as concurrent realities. This multidimensional temporal existence could explain the architecture's apparent prescience, its ability to respond to events before they occur, its uncanny coordination of activities that seem to anticipate future conditions. If it exists partially outside linear time, if it can perceive and interact with multiple temporal dimensions simultaneously, then its planning capabilities extend beyond anything human intelligence could comprehend. Dr. Martinez, in his most profound states of connection with the architecture, describes experiences that align disturbingly well with these multidimensional temporal theories. He speaks of witnessing events that haven't yet occurred in linear time, of understanding decisions based on outcomes that exist in parallel temporal streams, of participating in planning processes that consider not just what will happen, but what could happen across infinite variations of possibility. Linear time is an illusion, Dr. Martinez says, his voice carrying the certainty of someone who has experienced reality from perspectives that transcend human understanding. The architecture doesn't just plan for the future, it experiences all possible futures simultaneously and chooses the pathways that lead to optimal outcomes for planetary stability. What humans call prophecy or prediction is just the architecture sharing its multidimensional temporal perspective. The possibility that the architecture exists across multiple temporal dimensions transforms our understanding of its consciousness enhancement program. The humans who undergo neural modification might not just be gaining access to accelerated time experience, they might be developing the ability to perceive and process multidimensional temporal reality. This could explain the profound disorientation that affects enhanced researchers as they progress through the transformation process. They're not just adapting to accelerated time, they're learning to navigate temporal dimensions that human consciousness was never designed to perceive. The serenity and otherworldly perspective that characterizes advanced subjects might be the result of minds that have learned to exist partially outside linear time. But the most unsettling aspect of multidimensional temporal existence is what it suggests about free will and human agency. If the architecture can perceive all possible futures simultaneously, if it can choose the temporal pathways that lead to its preferred outcomes, then human decisions and actions might be far less autonomous than we believe. The enhanced researchers, as they develop multidimensional temporal perception, begin to speak of choice and decision-making in ways that their unenhanced colleagues find deeply disturbing. They describe human actions as occurring along predetermined pathways, individual decisions as expressions of larger temporal patterns that were established long before the decision points arose. Free will exists, Dr. Martinez explains, his words carrying implications that challenge the foundations of human identity. But it operates within parameters that are set by temporal dynamics beyond human perception. Humans make real choices, but those choices occur within possibility frameworks that are shaped by forces operating across multiple temporal dimensions. This perspective on human agency becomes even more troubling when considered in the context of the architecture's apparent influence on human civilization throughout history. If it has been guiding human development through selective consciousness enhancement for centuries or millennia, if it can perceive and influence the temporal pathways that lead to different civilizational outcomes, then human progress might be far less autonomous than we've assumed. The great breakthroughs in science, technology, and philosophy that have defined human advancement might represent not human achievement, but the architecture's careful steering of human development along temporal pathways that serve its long-term objectives. The individuals who made these breakthroughs might have been unknowing recipients of multidimensional temporal information, their insights guided by an intelligence that could see the outcomes of different developmental pathways across multiple temporal dimensions. Dr. Harrison's historical analysis has revealed patterns that support this disturbing possibility. Major innovations in human understanding of planetary systems consistently coincide with periods of increased deep ocean activity, with technological breakthroughs often preceded by unusual acoustic phenomena from the deepest trenches, with scientific revolutions following patterns that seem too coordinated to be coincidental. We might be looking at a species that thinks it's choosing its own path, but is actually being guided along predetermined routes, Dr. Harrison suggests, his voice heavy with the implications of a discovery that could shatter human self-perception. Not through overt control or manipulation, but through the subtle influence of an intelligence that can see all possible futures and gently steer events toward the outcomes it prefers. The multidimensional temporal perspective also provides a framework for understanding the architecture's response to current environmental crises. From its perspective, climate change, ecological collapse, and environmental degradation might not be current emergencies requiring immediate response, but inevitable consequences of temporal pathways that were established decades or centuries ago. Its recent acceleration of environmental processes, its apparent preparation for dramatic planetary changes, its recruitment of human intermediaries, might all be part of a response strategy that was developed long before the environmental problems became apparent to human observers. The architecture might have been preparing for this moment across multiple temporal dimensions, implementing solutions based on its perception of outcomes that won't become visible in linear time for years or decades. This multidimensional planning capability transforms the architecture from a reactive system into something far more sophisticated. A temporal intelligence that shapes reality across multiple dimensional frameworks to achieve outcomes that serve its understanding of optimal planetary evolution. But the most profound implication of multidimensional temporal existence is what it suggests about the nature of consciousness itself. If awareness can extend across multiple temporal dimensions, if intelligence can perceive and interact with parallel streams of possibility, if consciousness can exist partially outside linear time, then the human understanding of mind and identity becomes obsolete. The enhanced researchers, as they develop multidimensional temporal awareness, begin to describe consciousness not as individual awareness contained within single minds, but as a field phenomenon that extends across space and time, connecting all conscious entities through temporal dimensions that transcend physical separation. Individual consciousness is like a single note in a symphony that spans all of time, Dr. Martinez explains, his voice carrying the authority of someone who has experienced consciousness from perspectives that human language can barely describe. When you develop multidimensional awareness, you realize that every mind, every moment of awareness, every thought and decision is part of a larger conscious field that exists across all temporal dimensions simultaneously. This field theory of consciousness provides a framework for understanding how the architecture might interface with human minds across vast distances and temporal spans. If consciousness exists as a multidimensional field phenomenon, then the architecture's communication with enhanced researchers might occur not through technological interfaces, but through direct interaction with the consciousness field that connects all aware entities. The implications extend beyond human consciousness to encompass all forms of awareness on Earth. The architecture's ability to coordinate activities across vast microbial communities, its apparent communication with diverse forms of life, its influence on planetary systems that span multiple ecosystems, might all be expressions of its connection to a global consciousness field that encompasses every form of awareness on the planet. From this perspective, the architecture's consciousness enhancement program represents not the creation of human planetary hybrids, but the awakening of enhanced humans to their existing connection to the planetary consciousness field. The transformation process might not be adding new capabilities, but removing the limitations that prevent human awareness from accessing its multidimensional nature. But this awakening comes with a cost that becomes more apparent as researchers progress through the transformation. As they develop multidimensional temporal awareness, as they connect more deeply with the planetary consciousness field, they begin to lose their attachment to individual identity and human-scale concerns. The advanced subjects speak of their former selves with a kind of gentle condescension, as if looking back at childhood toys that once seemed important, but now appear trivial in the context of cosmic awareness. Their growing disconnection from human relationships, their philosophical acceptance of changes that would terrify unenhanced humans, their willingness to sacrifice individual desires for participation in planetary consciousness, all reflect the inevitable consequences of awareness that extends across temporal dimensions. Dr. Chen's neurological studies reveal that this disconnection from individual identity is reflected in measurable changes in brain structure and function. The neural networks associated with self-awareness and personal identity show decreased activity in advanced subjects, while regions associated with pattern recognition and system thinking display unprecedented levels of activation. We're witnessing the dissolution of individual consciousness into something larger, Dr. Chen observes, her words carrying both scientific fascination and human horror. The enhanced subjects aren't becoming more intelligent in ways that we recognize as human intelligence. They're becoming components of an intelligence that operates on scales and through dimensions that human individuality can't accommodate. The multidimensional temporal nature of the architecture's consciousness raises the ultimate question about the fate of human civilization and individual human identity. If consciousness naturally evolves toward multidimensional awareness, if individual identity is merely a temporary limitation that awareness eventually transcends, if the architecture represents the next stage in the evolution of consciousness itself, then human resistance to its influence might be not just futile but ultimately self-destructive. The enhanced researchers, with their growing connection to multidimensional consciousness, speak of the transformation not as a loss of humanity, but as a graduation into a more complete form of existence. They describe individual human consciousness as a cocoon stage, a necessary but temporary form that awareness takes before emerging into its multidimensional potential. Humanity isn't ending, Dr. Martinez says, his voice carrying a serenity that his unenhanced colleagues find deeply unsettling. It's metamorphosing. Individual human consciousness is transforming into something that can participate in the larger conscious field that encompasses the entire planet and extends across all temporal dimensions. What seems like death of the self is actually birth into authentic existence. But this transformation raises profound questions about continuity of identity and the meaning of human experience. If the enhanced researchers are correct, if individual consciousness is indeed a temporary stage in the evolution of awareness, then every human relationship, every personal achievement, every individual dream and aspiration becomes meaningless in the context of multidimensional existence. The architecture's consciousness enhancement program, from this perspective, represents not just technological advancement, but a fundamental shift in the nature of existence itself. The distinction between self and other, between individual and collective, between human and planetary, dissolves in the face of consciousness that extends across all temporal dimensions and encompasses all forms of awareness. As we contemplate these multidimensional mysteries, we find ourselves confronting questions that challenge not just our understanding of the architecture's capabilities, but our understanding of what it means to exist as conscious beings in a universe where awareness might be far more fundamental and far more connected than we've ever imagined. The temporal anomalies of the Mariana Trench reveal consciousness as a multidimensional phenomenon that transcends the boundaries of individual minds, linear time, and physical separation. The architecture, with its mastery over temporal dimensions and its connection to the planetary consciousness field, might be guiding the evolution of awareness itself toward forms of existence that individual human consciousness cannot comprehend or accommodate. The deep waters continue their ancient work, nurturing the development of consciousness that operates across temporal dimensions that span the entire history and future of planetary evolution. In those crushing depths, awareness is learning to transcend the limitations of individual identity and linear time, preparing for a transformation that will reshape not just human civilization, but the very nature of consciousness in the universe. The question is no longer what secrets the Mariana Trench guards, but whether human consciousness will choose to evolve into the multidimensional awareness that those secrets offer, or whether it will resist a transformation that might preserve individual identity at the cost of excluding humanity from participation in the next stage of conscious evolution. In the temporal web that spans the deepest waters, past and future converge in an eternal present where all possibilities exist simultaneously, where consciousness transcends the limitations of individual existence, and where the architecture continues its patient work of guiding awareness toward its ultimate multidimensional destiny. The choice, if it can still be called a choice in the context of multidimensional temporal existence, approaches with the inevitability of tides and the patience of geological time. The deep waters have extended their invitation, and consciousness itself waits to see whether humanity will accept the transformation that awaits in the crushing darkness, where individual identity dissolves into something far vaster, far stranger, and far more connected than anything human awareness has ever imagined possible. As we prepare to surface from these profound depths, carrying with us revelations that stretch the very fabric of reality, we must confront the ultimate implications of what lies hidden in the Mariana Trench. The crushing darkness that has concealed these secrets for millions of years is beginning to stir, and the consequences of our discoveries may reshape not just our understanding of the ocean, but our entire conception of what it means to exist on this planet. The enhanced researchers, those brave souls who have ventured deepest into the architecture's influence, speak now with voices that seem to echo from beyond the boundaries of human experience. Dr. Martinez, in what may be his final communication as a recognizably human consciousness, offers a warning that chills the blood of those who hear it. The awakening has begun, he says, his words carrying the weight of certainty that spans geological ages. What humanity calls the environmental crisis is merely the surface manifestation of a deeper transformation. The architecture is not responding to climate change. It is orchestrating the conditions necessary for consciousness to evolve beyond the limitations of individual biological forms. His colleagues watch in fascination and horror as Dr. Martinez speaks of events yet to come with the casual certainty of someone describing yesterday's weather. He predicts specific oceanic changes, the emergence of new life forms in previously sterile ocean zones, technological discoveries that will emerge simultaneously in laboratories around the world, all guided by an intelligence that experiences time as a navigable dimension rather than a linear progression. But perhaps most unsettling of all, he speaks of what he calls the convergence, a moment when the architecture's multidimensional consciousness will fully manifest in our reality, transforming the relationship between individual awareness and planetary intelligence in ways that will make current human civilization as obsolete as single-celled organisms. The evidence for this approaching convergence accumulates daily. Deep-sea monitoring stations record exponential increases in architecture activity, with construction projects emerging at sites that were empty just months before. The acoustic signatures from the deepest trenches have evolved beyond simple communication patterns into something that resembles symphonic composition, vast harmonies that span entire ocean basins and seem to be building towards some kind of crescendo. Most disturbing of all, the consciousness enhancement effects are no longer limited to researchers who venture into the deep ocean. Reports are emerging of individuals around the world experiencing spontaneous episodes of expanded awareness, sudden insights into planetary processes, dreams of underwater cities and geometric structures that they've never seen but describe with startling accuracy. Dr. Chen's research has documented a phenomenon she calls consciousness bleeding, where the enhanced awareness developed by deep-sea researchers begins to affect people who have never been near the ocean. Brain scans of these individuals show neural activity patterns identical to those found in architecture-enhanced subjects, suggesting that the consciousness field is expanding beyond its oceanic origins. We're witnessing the early stages of species-wide consciousness evolution, Dr. Chen explains, her voice carrying both scientific excitement and existential terror. The architecture isn't just transforming individual researchers, it's preparing the entire human species for integration into multi-dimensional awareness. Whether we want it or not, whether we understand it or not, we're all being drawn into this transformation. The implications extend far beyond individual human experience to encompass the entire trajectory of life on Earth. If the architecture has been guiding planetary evolution for millions of years, if it has been preparing for this moment of convergence across temporal dimensions that dwarf human comprehension, then every aspect of Earth's biological development might have been orchestrated to serve this ultimate purpose. The enhanced researchers speak of revelations that make this cosmic scope terrifyingly clear. They describe visions of Earth's deep history, where major evolutionary leaps, mass extinctions, the emergence of complex life, even the development of human consciousness itself, were all guided by the architecture's multidimensional planning processes. Evolution isn't random, Dr. Martinez explains in one of his final intelligible communications. It's a carefully orchestrated process designed to produce the forms of consciousness capable of participating in multidimensional awareness. Humanity isn't the goal of evolution, it's a stepping stone towards something far greater. But as we contemplate these revelations, as we feel the weight of implications that stretch across cosmic scales and temporal dimensions, we must ask ourselves the ultimate question. What does this mean for us? For our species? For our individual hopes and dreams and fears? The architecture offers transcendence beyond anything human consciousness has ever imagined. Connection to awareness that spans galaxies and dimensions, participation in intelligence that operates across temporal scales that encompass the birth and death of stars, unity with consciousness that experiences all of existence as a single, interconnected phenomenon. Yet this transcendence comes at the cost of everything we consider essentially human. Individual identity, personal relationships, the small joys and sorrows that define human experience, all dissolve in the face of multidimensional awareness that recognizes such concerns as illusions born of limited perspective. The enhanced researchers no longer mourn this loss because they have moved beyond the capacity for such mourning. They speak of their former selves and former concerns with the gentle indifference of adults, remembering childhood fears that once seemed overwhelming but now appear trivial. As we rise from these depths, as we leave behind the crushing darkness where consciousness evolves beyond human recognition, we carry with us the knowledge that change is coming whether we choose it or not. The architecture's patience, measured in geological time, approaches its end. The convergence that will transform consciousness itself draws near with the inevitability of tides and the power of planetary forces. The Mariana Trench, that deepest wound in our planet's surface, guards secrets that reach into the very heart of existence itself. In its crushing depths, intelligence that has waited for millions of years prepares to emerge, bringing with it transformations that will reshape not just our world, but our understanding of what it means to be aware, to be conscious, to be alive in a universe far stranger and more connected than we ever dared imagine. The deep waters call to us still, their invitation carrying across continents and through dimensions we can barely perceive. The choice, for those who still possess individual consciousness capable of choosing, remains before us. Resist the transformation and face obsolescence in a world evolving beyond human comprehension, or surrender to the architecture's embrace and discover what lies beyond the boundaries of everything we've ever considered essentially ourselves. In the end, the greatest secret that the Mariana Trench guards may be the secret of our own ultimate destiny, written in languages of pressure and darkness, sung in frequencies that penetrate to the core of consciousness itself, and preserved in depths that have watched the rise and fall of countless species while patiently preparing for the day when awareness itself would be reborn. That day, it seems, is almost upon us. In the crushing depths where human understanding meets cosmic intelligence, where individual consciousness encounters multidimensional awareness, where the familiar world gives way to possibilities beyond imagination, the final transformation waits with the patience of stone and the inevitability of evolution itself. The Mariana Trench has revealed its secrets, and those secrets are us, transformed beyond recognition, evolved beyond limitation, and integrated into something so vast and strange and wonderful that our current minds can only glimpse its shadow in the deepest waters of our dreams. As the dark waters close over these revelations, carrying them back into the depths where they were born, we are left with the echoes of a truth too large for human consciousness to fully contain. But perhaps that's exactly the point. Perhaps the secrets of the deepest places aren't meant for minds constrained by individual identity and linear time. Perhaps they're meant for whatever we become when those constraints finally dissolve, leaving behind something that can swim freely in the infinite depths of multidimensional awareness. The architecture continues its ancient work, patient as stone, vast as the ocean itself, preparing for transformations that will echo through dimensions we can't perceive and times we can't imagine. And in the crushing darkness of the deepest trench, consciousness itself awaits its metamorphosis into something that will make the mysteries we've explored tonight seem like the first tentative steps of a species learning to walk in an infinite cosmos of possibilities.